So back to my journey to find good in the world. On the 8th episode of the show, I was excited to have my first guest. Up until then, I had been reading stories that I'd found. An amazing young lady by the name of Mary Latham. Now, while Mary's story was inspirational, she traveled to all 50 states seeking out good in honor of her mother, who she had lost from cancer. It was a story Mary told me about one of the people she met on her journey that really hit home. Mary met a gentleman who asked her, "Do you look up or do you look down?" Now, Mary was a little puzzled by this, but he clarified and said, "When we effort to look up, we can find the good things in the world. But if we only choose to look down, we'll never see them, and we'll continue to build a false narrative that there is nothing but bad in the world." I can tell you that once I personally started the effort to look up, extraordinary things started to happen to me. The first example that I can recall was while enjoying breakfast with my girlfriend. We witnessed an elderly couple sitting next to us in a restaurant starting to cry, and we were concerned, only to find out that the young couple sitting at the next table over had randomly decided to pay for the breakfast of that elderly couple. The impact that that little bit of kindness had on those senior citizens confirmed something that my guests have said to me time and time again, that no act of kindness is too small to matter, and that while the person providing the kindness may consider it no big deal, the impact on the recipient is often a far greater impact than they realize. On another occasion, I was waiting for a cancer patient to complete their treatment. I volunteer for the local American Cancer Society via the Road to Recovery program, where we transport patients to and from their treatments. So I'm sitting in a local coffee shop. Looking out the window, I saw a van pull in with a sign on it that said, "Pittsburgh Good Deeds." Well, without hesitation, I left my coffee, my computer, and my briefcase on the table and raced out the parking lot to meet the owner of the van. He turned out to be a wonderful human being who does precisely what the sign on his van says. He does good deeds for people. Being good with his hands, he primarily does fix-it type work for those who cannot afford to pay someone. But he does much, much more. In fact, when we met that day and I asked him if he would like to be a guest on the show, he told me that he would, but it would have to wait a couple weeks because he was donating a kidney later that week to a complete stranger. Now, before I continue, let me recalibrate things for you. You and I can make a positive impact on someone else and their lives without having to give a kidney. Remember, no act of kindness is too small. Another example of looking up came when my girlfriend found the Good News Letter newspaper while we were on vacation in the Finger Lakes of New York. Apparently, she was looking up also. That's another thing about seeking out good. Acts of kindness, good deeds, whatever you care to call them, are contagious. Doing good is good for you, and there's actual scientific evidence of this. It acts almost as a drug. The more you do it, the more you want to do it. It also has a multiplier effect, which is very exciting. People see or hear about someone else committing a random act of kindness and it encourages them to do something similar. Not convinced? Here's an example we're all familiar with. Let me ask you, who is it that helps little old ladies across the street? It's the Boy Scouts, right? Now, how do we all come to know this? We all do, but the reality is it had to start with one Boy Scout helping one little old lady across the street. Now that's a multiplier effect when we all know about it. By the way, that story was told by one of my guests, Neil Nybo. As my journey continued, and I forced myself to spend more time looking up, I found good in familiar places like right here in Pittsburgh. I came across Leah Lizardano. Now, do you know Leah? She founded 412 Food Rescue right here in Pittsburgh. And using technology that powers Uber and Lyft, the ride hailing services, Leah matched food donors with needy organizations and individuals. Volunteers use the app, they just log into the app, and it directs them to where to pick up the food and where to drop it off. I've actually volunteered with this group, and if you're looking for a volunteer opportunity, I highly recommend them. The impact Leah and the team at 412 Food Rescue has had is absolutely amazing. And I'd have never heard of her if I hadn't decided to seek out good in the world. I found good being done by people who I'd known for years but never knew of their efforts. Because as I discovered over and over, these folks aren't doing it for fame, publicity, or even a pat on the back. A perfect example is my good friend, Reverend Jimmy. Reverend Jimmy ministers to prisoners in some of the highest security prisons in the state of Virginia. In doing so, he provides hope to, I can't think of another way to say it, the hopeless. Now, I'm not soft on crime and believe if you committed one, you deserve your punishment. But as Reverend Jimmy pointed out to me, some of these folks made one very, very bad decision in their lives. One. And they'll never see the outside world for the rest of their lives because of it. That thought sends chills down my spine. I don't know if it does with you. I'm 61 years old, and while I've never committed a crime, I've certainly done some stupid things in my youth. And I think of that saying, there but for the grace of God go I. When I think of those inmates, and it provides me with a much greater capacity for compassion towards them. Another more lighthearted example for you, the Random Note Project. Have you heard of this? If you haven't, you can Google them. This project was started by a self-proclaimed introverted college student, Gabrielle Bouvard, who decided to post notes with positive messages on them in random public places. They are a wonderful pick-me-up and a simple but effective way of impacting someone's life in a positive manner. Again, I have to thank my girlfriend for spotting one of these at Peters Lake, right here in Pittsburgh. When I spoke to this young lady, I complimented her on the idea and then said what I've told numerous guests on my show. Why didn't I think of that? That's another key point to mention. If you're sitting there thinking, oh, I'll never come up with an idea that matters, please don't be so hard on yourself. Time after time, I've met people who took a simple idea and made it into something truly impactful. For example, I love to fly fish. And somehow, by looking up, I came across the Gilbert Brothers. Again, one of the Gilbert Brothers actually resides here in Oakmont, Pennsylvania. Now, the Gilbert Brothers love to fly fish and are from a family that also does missionary work. To be more specific, they do missionary work in Cambodia. It was heart-wrenching to hear from them that many Cambodians are lured to Thailand for employment only to end up abused. The Gilbert brothers came up with a way to tie, no pun intended, their love of fly fishing to their conviction in ministry work to help these people out. They taught the young people how to tie flies and then marketed them to some of the high-end fly fishing shops back here in the United States. The effort has been so successful that the brothers have been able to pay wages equivalent to that of a teacher in Cambodia to the workers who now are also part owners in the business. It's a fantastic story that makes me smile every time I think about it. During the time that I was doing the Proof Positive podcast, I published 77 episodes. Each had stories of random acts of kindness, good things happening in our world. So that's a lot of good in the world. And I didn't stop because I ran out of good news either. I personally borrowed some of the ideas from my guest and bought military personnel a lunch, stopped to help strangers on the street who seemed in need, given money and talked to the homeless, done environmental work, volunteer environmental work. And as I mentioned, worked with the American Cancer Society and 412 Food Rescue. besides doing the podcast. I mention these not for a pat on the back. See, I told you people don't do that. Don't look for the fame or glory, but to provide you with some examples of how you might help. And there are many, many more great organizations that could use your help, either monetarily or through the use of your time. In closing, I'd like to encourage you to start to look up and seek out ways that you can get involved in making our world a better place. Trust me, while it may feel uncomfortable at first, you will love it and start to seek out more opportunities. And remember the multiplier effect of kindness. And I'll close with those words from Van Gogh. Great things are not done by impulse, but by a series of small things brought together. Thank you.